Have you ever walked past an old monument and wondered what stories it could tell? Well, imagine if those stories were written right there on the stone, but in a language nobody could read for centuries. That's exactly where our story begins today. It's a real-life historical detective story about how an entire lost empire in India was pieced back together. So yeah, grab your magnifying glass. We're about to crack a code that literally rewrote history.
So, for hundreds and hundreds of years, inscriptions just like this one, found on rocks and pillars all across the Indian subcontinent, were a total enigma. I mean, you could see it was writing, right? A message from the deep, deep past, but the language, completely lost. It was like history was trying to talk, but it was stuck on mute, locked away in stone.
And that really is the big question, isn't it? What secrets were these carvings holding? What kind of great king? What forgotten empire? Or what powerful new ideas were they trying so hard to preserve? The answers were just hiding in plain sight, waiting for the right person to finally come along and crack the code. And this is where our detective story really kicks off. This wasn't about digging for buried treasure in the ground. It was about deciphering the voices of the past, cracking the code that held an entire empire's secrets. Okay, so meet our detective. His name is James Prinsep, and this is back in the 1830s. Now, you might be picturing some kind of Indiana Jones character, but he wasn't really an archaeologist. He was an officer working at the East India Company's mint, an expert in coins. But he became absolutely fascinated by these ancient scripts and basically made it his personal mission to figure them out.
So Prinsep honed in on two key scripts. The first was Brahmi, which was the one you saw most often. The other was Kharosthi, which was used more in the Northwest. And by meticulously, I mean painstakingly comparing characters and inscriptions, he did what no one had been able to do for centuries. He figured them out. He deciphered them. This was, no exaggeration, the Rosetta Stone moment for early Indian history.
You know, the science Prinsep was basically pioneering here is called epigraphy. It's the study that lets us turn these silent stone carvings into actual historical documents. It allows us to finally hear the voices of the past. Once that code was cracked, history could finally speak.
So what was the first huge reveal? Well, once they could read the inscriptions, they saw that they kept talking about a king, a ruler named Piyadasi. Now that translates to something like pleasant to behold. A nice title for sure, but who was he? No king with that name was known to any historian at the time. It was a brand new mystery.
The next big piece of the puzzle fell into place when scholars started digging into old Buddhist texts. And get this, these texts talked about a legendary emperor named Ashoka. The real aha moment came when they found a few inscriptions that used both names. That was it. The link was confirmed. Piyadasi was the great emperor Ashoka. And just like that, a figure from old stories stepped right out of myth and into real, solid history. Okay, so to put all this into perspective, let's just quickly look at the timeline. You have the ancient Harappan civilization, which fades away around 1500 BCE. Then there's a pretty long gap, but around 600 BCE, things really start to heat up. You see the rise of early states and cities, and all of that action eventually leads to the founding of the Mauryan Empire, Asoka's empire, around 321 BC.
So Prinsep's incredible discovery didn't just introduce us to one king. No, it unlocked an entire political world that had been totally lost to time. A world of 16 powerful competing kingdoms.
This era was dominated by what ancient texts call the Mahajanapadas. It's a cool word, and it literally means great states. And there were 16 of these major players on the scene. So you have to imagine a world of constant competition, shifting alliances, and yeah, plenty of warfare.
Some of the real heavy hitters of the time included kingdoms like Koshala, Gandhara, and Avanti. But as we're about to see, there was one kingdom that was destined to rise above them all, Magadha.
And look, these weren't just simple tribes. The Mahajanapadas were sophisticated, complex states. We're talking fortified capital cities, standing armies, and organized bureaucracies. You know, the whole shebang. And they funded all this by collecting taxes from everyone, from farmers and traders to artisans. So how did this world of 16 competing kingdoms become one single unified empire? Well, the answer lies in the strategic rise of one incredibly dominant power.
All right, so over the course of about 200 years between the 6th and 4th centuries BCE, the kingdom of Magadha, which is in modern-day Bihar, just started to systematically take over its rivals. It wasn't an overnight thing, but a slow, steady consolidation of power.
So you've got to ask, why Magadha? What was their secret sauce?
Well, they had some serious strategic advantages going for them. First, their land was incredibly fertile. So, great agriculture. They also had easy access to iron mines, which meant better tools and stronger weapons. And get this, their forests were home to elephants, which were basically the tanks of ancient warfare. And maybe most importantly, the Gunga River system gave them a superhighway for cheap and easy communication and transport. They had it all.
And you can still see the evidence of Magadha's early power today. What you're looking at here are the massive fortification walls at its first capital, Rajgir. These walls were built right into the hills, creating this incredible natural fortress. It's a clear sign of a powerful, wealthy, and very well-organized state.
The rise of Magadha really hit its peak with the founding of the Mauryan Empire by its very first emperor, a man named Chandragupta Maurya. This was a huge deal. It was the first time that most of the Indian subcontinent had been brought together under a single ruler. Okay, so with the empire established, we can now circle all the way back to the man who left us all these amazing clues, Chandragupta's grandson, the great Emperor Ashoka, and the message he so desperately wanted the world to hear.
I mean, the sheer scale of Ashoka's empire is just staggering. And we know how big it was because his inscriptions, the very same ones that James Princip deciphered, have been found scattered across thousands of kilometers. We're talking from modern-day Afghanistan in the northwest all the way down into southern India. It was massive.
So what was he so eager to tell everybody across this vast empire? Well, his core message was all about something he called Dhamma. Now, this wasn't really a new religion. You should think of it more like a moral philosophy, an ethical code for how he wanted his subjects to live their lives.
And what exactly did this Dhamma preach? Well, the principles are actually remarkably universal. Things like respect your elders, be generous to others, treat even slaves and servants with kindness, and this is a really big one, show respect for all religions and traditions, not just your own.
And this really brings us to the whole reason we can even have this conversation today. Ashoka was the very first ruler in India to use permanent stone surfaces to speak directly to his people and his officials. By carving his vision into rock, he literally carved his legacy into history, making sure it would survive even when his empire and the script itself was completely forgotten.
It's just an incredible story of rediscovery, right? To go from a silent, unreadable script to uncovering a vast, complex empire with a philosopher king at its helm. It really leaves you wondering, doesn't it? What other major secrets about our past are still out there, hiding in plain sight, just waiting for their own James Princip to come along and crack the code?